Once again, I am playing Going Medieval, the game where your faceless little people go medieval. The last time I played this game, I told the story of Analbeigh Canalbeigh, a vegetarian who is also a cannibal. This time around, I'm going to continue her story of what happened after the chicken tragedy of Asterley. But this isn't some Emmy award-winning story, so don't feel you need to watch the previous video to enjoy this one. But if you do care, there should be a link on the top right of the screen right about now you can click to watch the part 1 of this series. The last time we saw Analbeigh, her little colony of humanitarians had some dire issues with attempting to raise chickens. Everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. The funny part of this being that about 2 days after I finished that playthrough, update number 9.5 was released. And while it was called the coin bartering update, it really should have been called the Save Our Chickens update, as it included mechanics that would have saved my chickens in at least 3 of the 4 chicken tragedies that Analbeigh had to live through. But here we are after Analbeigh fled her compound, alone. The horrors of Asterley still haunt her and has caused some fissures in the conviction she had held about her vegetarianism. While seeing her friends and dreams get butchered in front of her surely had a role to play in it, it really all started the day she tasted that egg. Carrots, beets, cabbages and the like just no longer provided joy after discovering the wonderments of that egg. And not just eggs, but also dairy. So while she might still eat a person every now and then, milk, eggs, and cheese were her true gods now. So she ventured forth looking for new lands to start anew where she won't be found by those who had hurt her previously. A new home where she can live a hedonistic life of chugging milk and sucking eggs. As she wandered through the valleys, she acquired a cow who would provide her with the milk she desired. And as she traveled through the hillsides, she acquired a pair of chickens to provide her with all the eggs one could need. And then one night, as she and her entourage spent the night with an isolated stranger, she learned from this stranger of a place which sounded like nothing short of the Holy Land. The stranger regaled her with tales of a land out past the sunset where the people only lived off 2 things: dairy and booze. A place where she could fit in and start a new life. She set out in the morning, and by that autumn she had arrived in these blessed lands, the mountains known as Wisconsin. The first autumn was rough, with only an occasional egg from her one hen and the milk from her one cow. Analbeigh often found herself broken and delusional while building a pen to protect her chickens and a cabin to protect her cells. But after half a season, the first spark of hope lit up the farm. The spark of chicken coitus. Rejoice! More chickens meant more eggs, and more eggs meant more survival. But there was still barely enough food to keep only Analbeigh alive, so the first few outcasts looking to find a safe haven in Wisconsin had to be turned away. Analbeigh continued to work alone while the egg production naturally ramped up. She built a barn that would be used to eventually store all the food for her chickens and other livestock that would be present on the farm. And in the winter, she trained a few goats and built them a pen. This was good, as goats would also be able to provide her with more of that life-giving milk. The remaining winter and spring were tough, but the chickens kept at their coitus, and at the doorsteps of the next summer, Analbeigh had reaped the fruits of her suffering. For on the last day of spring, she had finally accumulated enough ingredients to cook a proper meal from her eggs and milk. Rejoice! In summer, she found some wild sheep to train. Another blessing, as more sheeps equals more milk. By autumn, she was able to make proper meals with enough regularity that she believed it was time to allow a roommate in to help divvy up the workload of the farm. That autumn, a woman named Reichheld arrived, a 23-year-old soothsaying carter who Analbeigh resisted the urge to eat and instead allowed her to become a friend. They built some workshops, and they were both such staunch oak brethren that they built an elegant temple to worship in. Life was good for the two, but a new problem showed itself in the settlement. A problem known as cats. Sure, they both loved having the little furry guys around, but cats will do as cats will do. And what cats will do is lap up all the fresh milk being produced on the farm. So the decision was made to rehome the cats to the next trader that came along. A trader showed up and traded some blocks of ice for the cats. And while he was there, Analbeigh got to chit-chatting with him about how they moved to the mountains of Wisconsin to start a commune that only eats food derived from eggs and milk, and how it's been tough going, but also a great life. And while discussing how rock hard and slow moving her, was with the trader, he suggested maybe they eat some of the apples they had on stock to maybe make things move a little less slowly. Analbeigh considered this for a brief moment, but no, the Wisconsin diet must remain pure. But it did give her another idea. They had produced more apples than they could turn into booze, so what if they could turn those apples into eggs? The cartography table was researched, and soon a caravan loaded with apples was on its way out of the settlement. A few days later, it returned with a bumper crop of eggs, milk, and junket. They would feast well this season. By the third year, things were looking good for Analbeigh. Gunhild and Andrew had moved into Wisconsin, and they had plenty of goats, sheep, and cattle to provide milk. And along with the chickens, they had also domesticated some wild pheasants to help produce some more extra eggs to eat. It was the peaceful farming existence that Analbeigh had dreamed of. But those dreams soon turned into nightmares. After 3 years of living free, raiders had finally found them again. They fought hard and eventually turned back the invaders, but not before poor Andrew had been slain. This stirred up some horrible emotions deep within Analbeigh. The raiders had found her. They knew where she was. They would be back. They murdered Andrew. But what if next time it were the chickens that fell? This could not stand. She gave Andrew the best sending off she knew of and started to think about the chickens. This meager pen would no longer serve. Plans were drafted and construction began on a more intense chicken coop. A year later, and progress on the new fortified coop was underway. During this year, 2 more settlers were invited into the colony, Henrik and Sarah. Henrik was proving to be a good worker, but Analbeigh later realized she may have messed up. She was far too distracted with providing a chicken protection that she failed to realize that Henrik was a filthy Church of Restitution believer. Oh. In a previous life, she may have turned him into resources, but he was proving to be a valuable asset to the colony, so she decided acceptance was the way to go. But soon after, oh my, his lying restitutionist tongue also convinced sweet Gunhild to convert religions as well. But again, this was a new start and a new Analbeigh, so she let them stay and gave the go-ahead to start construction of a temple for the filthy restitutionists to keep them happy. But it all kinda worked out in the end, as she's been thinking they needed a new brick shithouse anyways. Another year had passed, and the chicken castle was further taking shape, but despite the progress, the previous year had been a rough one. Due to some mismanagement of farming logistics, food for the animals ran out during the winter, and no one seemed to notice. That spring, all the starving cattle just soon died in droves, and in a panic that the other pens would soon collapse as well, all the gates were opened, and the animals were allowed to fend for themselves on whatever crops and plants they could find. Milk production took a serious blow from this loss. But if that wasn't enough, the raiders also came back. The protective aura from the chicken castle was not yet complete, and this raid ended in tragedy. Poor Reicheld had been slain. Analbeigh was so upset over the loss of the first person to help her on this new venture that she couldn't even bring herself to eat Reicheld, no matter how tasty she looked. But instead, she gave her a funeral pyre, as was customary in these parts. Losing Reicheld stung, but her place was taken by a few new settlers, Wilhelm and Maud. The following spring, the final piece of the chicken castle was completed. A glorious balcony where Analbeigh could sit and look over all she had built. And also a death cage where they could slaughter any more raiders who attempted to ruin their day. And live, slaughter, love they did. The raiders would come, and at the doors of the death cage, the raiders would fall. You sleep with the chickens tonight, fiends! 6 years after arriving in Wisconsin, Analbeigh looked over what she had built and was proud of what she had proven. That the Wisconsin diet was viable for a small colony. And a new Pickles the sheep had been born. Rejoice! But there was still something missing. Something that wasn't enough for her. She had come this far and had built a glorious chicken sanctuary where her foul friends can live out complete and meaningful lives. But it was only occupied by a scant handful of chickens. Analbeigh wasn't sure if it was an edict handed down by the gods or kings that only permitted her a few dozen chickens, but she had lived a life of disregarding the established normalities of society. What is one more transgression notched in her belt? And with that transgression, the era of rampant chicken coitus had begun. What had started as 30 chickens soon grew to 60, 120, 200. By winter, 400 fucking chickens filled her chicken castle. This was the dream Analbeigh had dreamt. But the chicken is not eternal, and the whirlwind of chicken coitus would soon turn into a drumbeat of chicken passings. Analbeigh wasn't ignorant to the cyclical nature of life, so she had prepared for this phase in her farm. For the past 5 years, out behind the Oak Brethren Temple, her settlers had been hard at work. Hard at work building the most glorious tomb for chickens the world had ever seen. Working day and night, they taxidermed every deceased chicken in the farm, so its life and the way it lived would never be forgotten. But in time, even that tomb would become stuffed to the brim with the preserved remains of all of Analbeigh's chickens. Something had to give. In the winter of 1361, 8 full years after starting her colony in the mountains of Wisconsin, Analbeigh looked out at the horizon and had a vision. She waited for spring to arrive and then grabbed her tools and started stacking limestone bricks. One after another, after another, after another. They labored for a year stacking bricks into a grand monument. A monument that grew taller and taller until eventually it stood out standing 100 feet above the horizon. But oh no, this wasn't the final shape. The monument Analbeigh had built was to become something greater. Behold the halls of the dead, a memorial for all the chickens lost to bullshit polecat invasions before the 9.5 protection patch. This monument, this memorial was for all of them. This monument, which is now adorned with the final resting places of 682 of the finest chickens to ever have lived on Analbeigh Canalbeigh's chicken farm. Here we have Mia, who passed in 1361. And over here we have Jispa, who also passed away in 1361. And way up here at the top of the monument, we have Libby the chicken. Sweet Libby, who died a legend in 1360. For during the debauchery of the coitus whirlwind, Libby managed to give birth to 11 whole chickens. Truly a hero for the modern times. And with the greatest chicken monument of all mankind built, Analbeigh was finally content with her life. All those who had fallen shall not be forgotten. She had done good and was about to receive the greatest news of all. Her monument had ushered in a golden age for the people of Wisconsin. Rejoice! Oh, what a story that was. If you made it this far, why not smash that subscribe button? I'd really appreciate it. And up on the screen are a few other stories that are probably equally as awesome for you to enjoy. Alright, I'll see you next time.